So we now got Anita Squires. She was kind enough to come to Edinburgh and do a session there. She was sort of the last one of the day, I think, last time, and I wasn't there. But we thought it would be nice to get Anita to present to a bigger audience than there. So she'll talk about hidden voices and lost ideas. So just really lovely to have these sort of sessions. We try and do one every time, which is not so much about how to do IT. It's about why we do this, who does it, and the things that we probably don't think about, which we should do. Okay?
Okay. Let's see if this works. Yeah, we have slides.
Okay.
After that, nothing else matters. Hi, I'm Anita, and I'm honoured today to be bringing you my talk, Hidden Voices and Lost Ideas. My inspiration for this talk is a general love of history and the very talented women that I've worked with while being as part of IT. Before I start, I want to ask a question. What do you actually picture when you think of a computer programmer? And where did that image come from? So what's the talk about today? As I said, as it was mentioned, it's not actually a technical talk, unfortunately. So I'm breaking the mold on everybody else who's talked to you today. But it's an introduction to 10 women who changed tech, what happened and how women became a minority in this role, why 1984 is considered a key date, and why it matters, both in the positive of having more women in the workplace and the negatives of excluding them. In the next few moments, I'll be introducing you to 10 remarkable women who have helped to shape various aspects of modern technology. Some of them are well known, others are obscure for different reasons, and I apologise to a few of them that I butcher their names. I know it's not an extensive list, and I won't get into details about all of them, but I do only have 30 minutes of your time. With that, let us begin. Ada Lovelace, a poetess, a mathematical genius, and the writer of the first acknowledged programme. She met and became lifelong friends with Charles Babbage in 1833 as he was working on trying to develop his difference engine. In 1842, Babbage approached her to translate Luigi Mabrani's paper from French to English. She both translated and added notes A to G, including her vision for how the engine could process symbols as well as just numbers, showing her vision for the computer of the future. Note G is considered the first true program, where she showed how to calculate the 7th Bertolini number. Ada sadly died at the very young age of 36, and Babbage's engine never became a reality. However, 100 years later, Alan Turing was still citing her when he talks about how he compared his own computer programming to her vision of the computer. Ada Lovelace Day is celebrated on the second Tuesday of every October. Hedy Lamarr, an actress and an inventor. Most people, if they know her at all, know her as one of the faces of the golden age of Hollywood, a woman so beautiful that it was almost annoying to her that her mind was never considered something she should be thought of for. And during World War II, Hedy, as well as being encouraged to help raise funds for the USA as part of the war effort, turned that very sharp mind towards helping to develop a system that would overcome a vulnerability of radio-controlled torpedoes by allowing sender and receiver to hop through frequencies in the same sequence. She patented this invention under her married name at the time, Hedy Kersler-Markey, and this is the actual patent that was there at the time. And although this was ignored for many, many years, it was rediscovered and it was actually used more recently in such technologies as GPS, Bluetooth, and the early development of Wi-Fi. Mary Wilkie. breaking barriers, left her early career plans of law complaining it was too full of men to work with computers. Got hired at MIT Lincoln Laboratories as a programmer. Despite being told as a woman she would never work with computers. A bit of bias there, I feel. But we don't talk about that too much, do we? In 1961 to 63, worked on the interactive operating system LIP6 for the first macrocomputer link. In 1965, Mary took the very unusual idea of picking up the computer and setting it up in a bedroom, so becoming the first person in history to have a personal computer. Her work anticipated what we now value in software, user-centric design. She did go back to law eventually. I think she decided that she was bored with men trying to tell her what to do. Katherine Johnson, a figure some may recognise from the very popular movie Hidden Figures. Katherine worked on the calculations for the first American orbital flight around the Earth and was the first manual computer to be named as a co-author of a technical note, which is actually stored in the NASA archives, where you can see her proudly named as the second author. John Glenn even asked her to check the calculations he was given from the new machine computer because he trusted her more with his safe return from space. As mentioned earlier, the always popular Rear Admiral Grace Hopper, a pioneer of computer sciences, a naval officer, and one of the most influential figures in early computing, sometimes also known as the Queen of Code. She played a key role in developing the computer language COBOL, which, as we may know, is still used today in some, basically, especially in the US deep state where we find out that the Doge guys didn't know what it was. She was an advocate for making computers accessible and programming understandable. She was also a very down-to-earth person. And she's also the reason that we now know the term debugging, as demonstrated here by the first found bug, which she found in 1947 in the Harvard Mark II in a relay. As you can see, being a very practical person, stuck it in a notebook, wrote bug found, and then carried on with her day. Adele Goldberg joined the Xerox PAC in 1973. She was the co-author of the Smalltalk 80 language and system manual, but she became the foundation for object-oriented programming. In 1980, famously and begrudgingly demonstrated Smalltalk to Steve Jobs and the Apple engineers. This demo was to go on to heavily influence the Macintosh UI as we know it today. An advocate for human-centered computing, seeing code as a tool for thought. I apologise to Sophie, I am not great at her surname yet. Sophie Anna Anadura, appointed as founder and director of the National Centre for Text Mining, NAMTech, at the University of Manchester in 2004. It was created to help researchers make sense of the vast amounts of scientific and technical data, turning unstructured information into knowledge through advanced language and data technologies. Started working with the European Bioinformatics Institute around 2009 to help establish shared standards for text and data mining. Also a champion of open interoperable language resources and tools to ensure that text mining technology remains accessible for both academics and industry. Radia Perlman. If Tim Berners-Lee is the father of the internet, then Radia is surely its mother. In the 1980s, her work on spanning tree protocol became the backbone of the internet. It made a huge impact on the way the network self-organizes, moving data and putting the basic rules of internet traffic in place. It is crucial for preventing network congestion. Well, you'd think that was a hard word. And maintaining reliable connections. It has allowed the internet to grow as we know it today. Elizabeth Jake Fienler. From 1972 to 89, Elizabeth ran the Network Information Center in California, which played a pivotal role in shaping the early infrastructure of the internet, developing and publishing the online white and yellow pages. These were the forerunners of search engines. So before we had search engines, everything went through these two documents. Her group also developed the familiar high-level domain extensions such as .com, .eu, .net and .gov, which is still in very common use today through many major industries. These contributions were fundamental in transforming the internet from a niche tool used by academics only to a global communication tool which we rely on today. And my last one of the day, Karen Spark-Jones. Karen was a brilliant computer scientist whose interest in the field of natural language processing and information retrieval helped with several advances. She is best known for her contribution to the concept of inverse document frequency. This is the key technology for helping determine the relevance of each word in a search engine term. So rather than it giving all the words in the statement the same weight, such as I want to know about Catherine Johnson or I want to know about Karen Spark-Jones, the search engine will take the two names and give them a much higher weight, returning the answers that you actually want. She was awarded the Ada Lovelace Medal in 2007. So, what happened? You've heard me talk about 10 amazing women. Some of them you may have heard of. Some of them are still active in today, such as Radia, Sophie, and Adele. They're all still speaking, they're all still working, they're all still very active in STEM. But some of them, such as Ada, took 100 years to get noticed. Grace got posthumously recognised by Barack Obama in 2008. Hedy didn't get any recognition for her inventions until well into her 70s. And a large part of this is that women are minimised. I mean, I joked when I walked in here that there was only men put up around the room, where I'm sure there should be some women somewhere that they could have put a few pictures of. I do acknowledge that the other room we were in, the Hessler room, is named after Caroline Hessler, which is a good start. So what happened? A change from a person to a machine. When a computer was someone who did calculations on paper, a woman was a natural choice. She was detail-orientated and focused and could do repetitive work many, many times over. And she was known for not making mistakes. However, when it became a machine, suddenly the rules changed about who could interact with a machine. And so knowledge to use a machine, of course, must come from a man. This was further cemented by what I always label my biased and very misguided study. In 1966, William N. Cannon and Dallas K. Perry were asked to produce a paper called the SDC Programming Profile. This was to develop a profile for business to help identify who was the best person to employ as a programmer. Now, there may have been a little bit of bias in who was selected for this particular study, because it was only a very small sample size of 1,400, and out of this self-selected sample, 1,200 of them just happened to be men. The results, the study concluded that the ideal programmer was a white, introverted, somewhat antisocial male, disconnected from emotions and social involvement. We have to ask how many of the men self-selected themselves fell into that category. And a final push to move women back to a more traditional gender role, which we see repeating today with such things in America as the DEI program, although it says it just wants to hire people who are qualified, DEI hires are also women. As I was once told when one of my developers got very annoyed at me, I was only in my job because I was a woman. But also after World War II, many women who entered the workforce to make up for the fighting men were expected to give up those roles and return for the returning soldiers. Along with the new wave of computer jobs requiring such things as degrees or further education, which was just not available to women at the time. I mentioned 1984 as a key date. And I have my lovely graph, as everybody needs a graph. So after several years of women losing pace and not really getting into any of the fields, all STEM fields started to pick up again around the 1970s. However, after 1984, there is a very, very steep, obvious decline in women going into computer sciences that is not seen in the other STEM subjects. And this has never really picked up again. As you can see, the graph has continued steadily to either plateau or continue to go down. There are several factors that can be considered as contributing to this drop, even though computers have become a common everyday thing everyday item in the households and have been since the early 1980s, with the introduction of such home computers as the Commodore 64 and the ZX Spectrum. These were always aggressively targeted as boys' toys. Even the lovely picture that I found from the area about bringing the Atari home, it doesn't have a girl programming. It has a boy with his husband, with his father looking on proud, and the mother and the daughter wondering at what he's doing. Whereas we get our girls' toys, which are Barbies and fashion wheel and roller skating, things that a girl can do on her own and be creative and be peaceful, not bother anybody. She can get on and make her own pretty clothes. She can go on and skate with her friends. Again, this reinforces the split. Boys did tech, girls did pretty things. Even now we see that today in toy shops, where boys have the blue aisles and girls have the pink aisles, and never the twain shall mix. And now we get to the only man I say that I ever really hate who has done anything to computing, Steven Levy, and his dismissive views of women in his very widely published book in 1984, Hackers, Heroes of the Computer Revolution. He regularly dismissed women in his book for being in the technical field as being horribly inefficient and wasteful, reinforcing the stereotype again that only men are good for tech roles. There was also, in the 1980s, even if a woman did get into a university, there was very harsh and non-conducive areas, such as the 1983 MIT study that found that women who raised their hands in class got talked over and ignored by professors, and even in groups were constantly talked over by their male counterparts. Or the University of South California, get the right place in America, which picked a naked Playboy model for one of its classes, where it was converting physical images into digital bits. Again, a little intimidating for a woman to try and sit in a class like that when you're being told to stare at another naked woman. Why does it matter? Why should it matter that most programmers are men? I mean, this is not the only place that has a gender bias. Look at things like primary school teaching or nursing. They're both the other way, with far more women than men. But there is a problem with this split, that not having women in the room very much impacts what happens afterwards when the decisions are made. Not having men as primary school teachers leads to headlines decrying the lack of male role models and the wish to have more men in teaching. The lack of men in nursing causes problems with moving and handling as the population gets older and larger. We rely more on porters, who are traditionally men, to do the work that nurses used to do, because nurses are not physically able to handle it. And so when we don't have women in the room for tech, what happens? As you can see, I'm not going to attempt a surname. I've attempted it several times and I always butcher it. So Joe, a researcher at MIT Media Lab, found that facial recognition software had a disproportionate error of 34% for black women compared to a 0.8% for white men. Now, we have to ask, is that because of the people who designed it, what it was trained on, or just an error in the software? It even impacts AI, as you can see by that lovely image there of Rona Wang, who was an Asian woman who put her picture into AI to get it slightly more professional looking for a LinkedIn post. And it decided to change her race and give her blue eyes. You cannot tell me that's a picture of the same woman, although it's meant to be. Or my favourite, the fact that I can shout at Siri for several hours. And as many as 14% of women have discovered, voice recognition software does not accept our voices, cannot understand us, and does not respond to us. So I've given you the negatives of not having women in the room. What are the positives? Time and time again, we're shown that having a more diverse workforce, if nothing else, improves the profit margin. As you can see there, McKinsey has pointed out in several different studies that profits go up when you have a more diverse background to work with. Also, it makes a happier work environment. Satisfaction studies go up. As you can see here, and it's 50% more likely that all of your people are going to stay, including the women if they feel supported. So, I'll leave you finally with the Katherine Johnson quote. Girls are capable of doing everything men are capable of doing. Sometimes they have more imagination than men. So that's my QR code. If anybody's still playing the game for points, they can scan it now. And I will take questions. I think I have some time for a few questions.
You do, yes, yeah,
Yep.
That's good. I'm coming up to help you.
Does anybody want to ask anything, or does anybody want to tell me who a computer programmer is?
I've got a couple of points, actually. 1984 was the year that I went to Brunel University to study computer science. And out of the 150 people in the room, there was 2 women. That was the problem. On the flip side of that, my son, as I mentioned earlier, he's studying veterinary medicine. 90% are women in veterinary medicine.
That's because that's where STEM is encouraging nowadays. If women show an interest in science, or if young girls show an interest in science, maths, it's doctors, it's vets that they're encouraged to become. I mean, you see if you've read the papers about the crisis nowadays, that there are more women than men going into doctors and going into vets, and they're wondering how long-term that's going to affect things, because sort of how are we planning for things like women taking a year out to have children? Will they have time to do that? Will they lose their places? More women becoming GPs because it's easier on the family.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the having to use porters at hospitals because it's difficult for women to handle the size of some people or some machinery and everything like that. There's no difference in vets, you know. A cow weighs several hundred kilograms, and that's coming towards you. So, you know, if we could equal it out, as I say, you know, it's disastrous for us every time we look around. The lack of women in IT really haunts me, because they shouldn't have that, and somehow we've got to change that. Funny enough, my daughter worked for McKinsey for 2 years, and one of the issues she had was that because she was a woman, she wasn't listened to. And they're the ones who are saying, creating these reports saying that they should have women in the workplace. So, the irony of that is quite amazing.
I occasionally get sent adverts by things that were meant for women that were designed by men.
So, any questions on the floor? Peter, sir?
Doing the more creative side of things. I think it's friendlier to women, yes. I wouldn't say there are more women, but there are more women BAs, there are more women testers overall than there are women developers. More men in infrastructure and that sort of thing. Just because of the uncomfortable hours, I think, partly. There's not very many women in gaming. I think partly because Blizzard scared them all off.
Any other questions?
What could be done to increase the percentage of women working in IT?
Be inclusive. It's not a case of you have to hire women. I would never say that. I mean, I've been accused of being a hire because I'm a woman. I may be accused of being on this stage because I'm the only woman speaker. But it's very much a case of, if there are places that are being that you can volunteer, you can lend your time, you can get in early, things like primary school, before girls are set in their ways that computers are not for them. Talk to both sexes and encourage both sexes. You don't need to pay special attention to girls or women. You need to encourage both, because both will because the boys will bring up the girls.
So change of curriculum at the primary school level would certainly assist, wouldn't it?
Yes. You need people who know how to use computers to teach people how to use computers. And you just need to get both interested young enough to keep it going.
Any other questions? Sorry, it's a bit difficult to see, actually. Everyone's so far away that...
You can't see anything obvious.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Anita. That was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you very much, guys.